This is Toledo Symphony Lab, a behind-the-scenes look at the world of classical music from WGTE Public Media and your Toledo Symphony. I'm Brad Cresswell. Joining me today are the Toledo Symphony's president and CEO, Zach Vassar, and also principal second violin and artistic administrator, Merwin Sue. We're talking today about Ludwig van Beethoven. I know you've all heard of Beethoven. This is, of course, the anniversary year of his birth, 250 years ago. And so there's a little bit going on with the symphony in this season with Beethoven. You're having some performances of Beethoven coming up shortly. Those will be available for streaming concerts as well. And you've got some Beethoven making an appearance later in the season. Merwin, you want to talk a little bit about Beethoven's presence on the TSO stage this year?
Well, absolutely. I think Beethoven is really one of those touchstone composers for pretty much every orchestral player. I think we all have great memories of performing Beethoven, and we all think back to various interpretations that we've performed, and his music is so human, and I think it really speaks to everybody. I think in this particular concert coming up, it's very interesting because we're focusing on a very, very short period in Beethoven's life. And it's this kind of transitional period between his middle and his late works. And I think it's a fascinating period of his musical evolution. So really excited to perform it.
We're going to dive into some of his personal life later with a little Beethoven quiz that I have for you guys. But Zach, I know you're a big Mahler fan. Where does Beethoven fall on your wish list?
Oh, wow. Well, of course, I put the late Romantics generally toward the top of my list, but Beethoven really is responsible for this whole Romantic era in my mind, and many others. So he would definitely be the earlier composer to be in my top five. I can't say if he's number 2, 3, 4, or 5, but he's definitely up there.
Give him an A-, maybe.
No, I adore him, as did Mahler, as we'll talk about perhaps in the context of today's show, is that we'll actually see the Mahler word, the M word, on this program in an arrangement of one of Beethoven's string quartets.
Yeah. When you get your Amazon TV series, will you please call it the M word?
The M word.
Like a show about Mahler.
Wow, that would be a fascinating story.
I think that'd be excellent. Well, you stole my segue there because I know that. No, that's okay. That's okay. Actually, I
you always seg better than I do, though.
I thought of it after you said it, but we won't let that information out. So we're doing 3 different works on this concert. There's one for a trombone quartet, which I had never heard before. It's really interesting. It's called 3 equals, meaning like equal choir. Everybody in the quartet is playing an equal part, just as difficult as the other. Then you've got the Symphony No. 7, one of my favorite of all-time Beethoven symphonies. But then, as you mentioned, Zach, this Mahler arrangement for string orchestra of one of the string quartets by Beethoven. Now, Merwin, you're a violinist. You've performed this quartet before, right?
Yes, it's the Serioso Quartet. It's amazing. It hits you like a punch in the face. It's just...
Good to know.
It's incredibly concise. I think one of the things I love most about Beethoven is, for me, I guess, kind of my aesthetic. I love it when you can't add a note, and I love it when you couldn't take away a note.
Yeah.
And I think for the Serioso Quartet, it's just like that. It's so incredibly lean, and yet it's so incredibly dense at the same time. And that first movement, it's just this hammer stroke. I love it.
We'll talk a little bit about how Mahler transcribed this for string orchestra, because he didn't add or subtract notes, did he?
Mahler used a lot of restraint in this, actually. I think that when we think of Mahler, the word restraint doesn't often come to mind. But
this is impossible for me to hear.
But he really... I think he was very reverent of the source material. He used the double basses as kind of his ability to kind of boldface or not boldface a little bit. So he would add double basses at various intervals to kind of accentuate something he felt of great importance. But really, the upper lines are very, very similar.
So it's sort of Mahler's interpretation of that quartet laid down on paper, and then you guys get the pleasure of interpreting that as well. So Beethoven through the filter of Mahler. I'm going to give 3 cheers. 3 cheers for Mahler.
Well, and Mahler did this. I mean, he did this with some of Beethoven's later quartets. He did it with Schubert quartets. I mean, it was a passion of his to go back and kind of resuscitate the early masters who came before him. And I think that also identified some of his own string writings. I mean, Merwin and I have compared the Opus 135 transcription that Mahler made of Beethoven's late quartets and compare that to the end of his Third Symphony, and you can't listen to it and not say that this is Mahler. I mean, it feels like this bridge has been erected.
Yeah, interesting. Why do they call it the serioso? I mean, that means the serious quartet, right?
There's a really interesting marking in the third movement of this. Typically, a third movement of a late Beethoven quartet is a scherzo, which has a playful quality to, at least it kind of connotes playfulness because of just the name, scherzo being the Italian for playful. And he chooses to kind of undermine that by saying that the tempo marking for this has to also have a serioso quality, a serious quality. So it's playful, lively, but serious. And I think that's such an unusual marking that it was applied to the entire quartet as a whole.
Yeah, you talk about playful but serious. I think that also sums up the Symphony No. 7 to a certain extent. That's a symphony that people don't know so much. They know the second movement, probably, because it's been used in so many different, films, TV, that sort of thing. It was hugely, hugely popular and encored, in fact, at the premiere. I want to just listen to a little bit of the Allegretto and remind folks of what this piece sounds like. That's a slightly shortened version for purposes of the radio. But, that's the serious part, one of the serious parts in the symphony. I think the last movement really takes it home, though. Unfortunately, I don't have that for us to play, but we can assure folks that it's not all, Sturm und Drang. It's when we get to the end, there's a wonderful ending to that Symphony No. 7. Now, all of these pieces were composed around the same time in Beethoven's life, as you mentioned. Do you know what was sort of going on with him when he wrote these works?
I actually don't know too much about kind of the biographical, kind of what was happening in his life between 1810, 1813. So,
well, it's as you mentioned, the transition from we say there are 3 periods in Beethoven's output. There's the early period, the middle period, and the later period. And this is transitional between the middle and later, around 1811, 1812, around there. When Beethoven was writing this music. I guess that he had been in poor health. Like, for instance, the Symphony No. 7, he wrote it while he was trying to recuperate. If memory serves, this is also around the time that he wrote that famous letter to the immortal beloved, right? So it seems like there's always some kind of literary, connection of what was going on in Beethoven. Yeah, Zach?
So was he? I always forget the biography at this point. But when he went into the Testament, had he made a suicide attempt, or was he just recovering from a prolonged illness?
I think he was in really poor health,
Okay.
and he was recovering. And you're talking about the Heiligenstadt Testament, which is a letter that he wrote, I believe, to his brother. And it reads like a suicide note. But the thing about Beethoven is he always seemed to be on the precipice of self-destruction, and that tended to fuel his art, the ability to find hope and the ability to find joy out of sorrow, right? And you can trace that whole journey in all of his major works. You hear it most explicitly in the Fifth Symphony of Beethoven. There's this journey that begins in tragedy and ends in triumph. And Zach, you mentioned Beethoven being, opening up the whole Romantic era of composers. Well, he created the blueprint for all of that. And in his Symphony No. 9, he really drove it home, with that ode to joy in the final movement. So much so that composers after that were intimidated to write their own symphonies because they felt they could never measure up to Beethoven, especially Brahms, 20 years to write his first symphony because he was in the shadow of Beethoven. But Beethoven made that blueprint of tragedy to triumph, which we still hear today in modern music.
And there is something to be said about the journey through the Third Symphony, the Fifth Symphony, certainly the Seventh Symphony. So I guess we have to go by odds here. There is this sort of wallowing, especially in the Allegretto movement. But then when you look at the Eighth Symphony and the Ninth Symphony, these are primarily very joyful and masterful experiences. And as Merwin was saying, is that as an editor, he wasn't wasting his breath in the Seventh Symphony, the Eighth Symphony, or the Ninth Symphony.
No.
So there is something about the maturity of the artist and the composer who maybe has figured out the turmoil as a composer by this point in his career, and is moving on to that final chapter, which is it's full of all sorts of explorations, but I don't think it's a younger man's game anymore.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that we haven't talked about in the Symphony No. 7 is the dance quality, and even that allegretto sounds like a dance, especially if it's not played too slowly, right? And even Richard Wagner called it the apotheosis of the dance, the Symphony No. 7. So it's all about dancing. Who wants to talk about that?
I'm a terrible dancer, so I have no right talking about
Two
this.
left feet. Right?
That's
like
right.
Me. Yeah.
I love that you, and I want to come back to the tempo of the Allegretto, because this movement that you just played an excerpt of a minute ago, it does have a funereal quality of it to it, and it can be played very slowly, but that can also rob it of a lot of the passion that comes through, because you think you have these kind of like continued rhythms in the winds and brass, and then you have these sliding passionate lines in the strings, and it's that sort of punctuation over the sliding bed of strings that I think makes it so arresting, but it is itself a magnificent exercise in rhythm. And then you go into the last two movements, which are very dance-filled, and the final movement just gallops off the stage if, again, the tempi are appropriate.
Yeah.
I've never heard Alain do the Seventh Symphony, but I've heard him do the Fifth, and we've certainly talked through the Third many times, and I know that he is very concerned about falling into that trap of the dirge when it comes to Beethoven.
Right. One of the things I noticed about Beethoven, especially as he got you, are you playing something on your phone there?
Sorry, I can't. It's going the wrong way.
Yeah, okay.
What was that?
Excellent.
You playing organ music?
It sounded a little bit like a calliope. We were at the circus all of a sudden.
I can tell whatever I was saying was not what Merwin was going to say, because he just started playing other music so that he didn't have to listen to it. But
I think he was just bored with what we were saying, so
exactly.
He was over there.
Well, he typically is. I mean, that's what the struggle of a genius.
Yeah.
I was trying to find the trio part of the Presto. And it was like
Gotcha.
it was escaping my memory for a second, and
now you know.
And now I know.
There it is. One of the things about Beethoven, especially as he got more and more deaf, was he sort of started, his tempos seemed to get faster and faster. Like some of his tempos, the tempo markings don't match the metronome markings that he put in there.
And the seventh is one of these that you can read the tempo markings and then you look at the variation in tempo markings at that time and be driven to magnificently strange consequences.
Yeah, and conductors tend to fall into one camp or the other.
That's
where
right.
They adhere to the metronome or they adhere to what they think is the spirit of Beethoven and his imagination.
But, I mean, this gives into the many interpretive qualities that are possible with Beethoven, and this is really where the Romanticism comes in. Even earlier in the symphonic cycle, it's there are many ways that you can drive it forward. But, the seventh is always going to be one of those special ones. I first discovered the symphony... it was Leonard Bernstein's final concert with the Boston Symphony was the seventh. And you talk about a slow tempo, that one is one of the slower performances I think I've ever heard. So that was the first really full performance I got excited about in the early 90s. You can imagine when you get to some of those that are following the original tempo markings, they're about 14 minutes shorter.
Well, Bernstein, it could be said, was, in very poor health at the time that he conducted that concert.
That's true.
So.
And I'm told he almost collapsed a couple times there at Tanglewood. But nonetheless, a phenomenal performance, and given the funereal qualities of that slow movement, somehow appropriate.
I do want to mention that this concert we're talking about is taking place this weekend, and it will be available for streaming online. We've talked about this before, but very important that folks know that it's not just in one place at one time. These are going to be up for, a period of time. So you can go back and watch your favorites. You can listen to pick and choose your concerts at your leisure. The website to do that is stream.artstoledo.com. And we certainly urge everybody to take advantage of that. Now, you can watch a live concert if you want, but just know that this kind of programming is going to go on through the whole season, where you can access these concerts on demand, which is, a brave new world out there in the age of COVID-19.
Yeah, so and this, I think, bears clarification still as we're in the early phases of launch for this new platform. There are really two products for every performance. One is the live one, and then one is the on-demand version of that, which is usually released around Monday morning following the last concert.
All right. Back to Beethoven. I've got a quiz. Everybody ready for the quiz? Let me pull the quiz music.
Well, I had some other quiz music.
Yeah, but this one we have the rights for.
This is where it starts to go. Yeah. You've played this before, Brad.
Yeah, this is our official quiz music, except for when it isn't. Right? I've got 7 different questions. I still have that
Vivaldi
here
from a couple weeks ago in my head,
In honor of Beethoven's 7th Symphony, I've got 7 questions, okay? Here we go. What subject was Beethoven really bad at?
Love.
That's not on here. Was it music? Was it math, or was it philosophy?
Wow.
Music, math, or philosophy? That really
as measured by what? His grade card?
Let me say really bad at in school.
Okay.
What was he really bad at in school? Music, mathematics, or philosophy?
I'll take the stab and go mathematics.
Yay! Yeah, absolutely. Mathematics, he left school when he was 11 years old so he could support his family. And he only studied addition and subtraction. He never got into the multiplication part. So he didn't know how to multiply numbers, which, of course, got him in trouble later when he was trying to keep track of his finances. But, he was quite bad at math. I'm not sure if he was so good at philosophy, but I'm sure he was pretty good at music.
He was certainly well read.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. And remember, you can answer all of these questions as, all of the above or none of the above. I won't say that.
I bet you this next one's either all of the above or none of the above. What do you think, Merwin?
It's this Brad Cresswell conundrum, right?
It is.
Yeah. Okay. We know that Beethoven went completely deaf. What other ailment did he suffer from? Was it rheumatic fever, cirrhosis of the liver, or chronic hepatitis? What other ailment did he suffer from? This was not a healthy guy.
No, so I feel like the temptation, based on how you lured me into this trap, is to say all of the above.
Yes, all of the above. In addition to that, he also had jaundice and he had colitis. Before he died in 1827, he was in his mid-50s. 25 pounds of water had to be drained from his abdomen.
Oh.
Right? And, this was also in a day and age when they didn't have anesthetics, so it was a pretty painful experience. But in true Beethoven form, he said his doctor was like Moses striking water from a rock. That's the quote.
And you say he wasn't good at philosophy.
Exactly.
I'm just happy we don't air this program during the lunch hour.
Exactly. We should have put in like a warning.
What you're about to hear contains some graphic description of Beethoven's ailments. Yeah.
May not be suitable. Okay. What were Beethoven's last words, according to somebody who was there when he died? Was it, "Applaud, my friends, the comedy is over," which he said in Latin, and I don't have the Latin here, so... Or was it, "I shall hear music in heaven," or was it, "Pity, pity, too late"?
I think it's B.
B? What is B?
I shall hear music in heaven.
I shall hear music in heaven.
Oh, I was so sure about that.
Okay. What was the question?
Pity,
His last words.
Pity, pity.
Pity, 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 bang, bang, right? That would be
now I have the
No, that was
bang,
right.
Bang, yeah.
Pity, pity, too late.
Yeah.
Because evidently his publisher had just delivered a case of wine, but Beethoven is too weak to drink. So those were his last words.
Nice
too
publisher,
late.
though.
Yeah. Okay, we've heard of hand-me-downs from older siblings. What did Beethoven get from his older brother? Was it his name, his nephew, or money?
Definitely his nephew.
Definitely the nephew.
Yeah. Wait, what?
From his older sibling.
Oh, trick question.
Yeah. I'm all about trick questions.
Sorry, what were the other two?
His name or his money?
Well, he didn't ever have any money.
I'm actually going to say money. I'll go with money.
He had a name of aristocracy, but he didn't have the money that came with it. Yeah.
His name, Ludwig. He had an older brother also named Ludwig who died shortly after birth. So they tried again, and that time it stuck. So they made a second Ludwig. He was named after his grandfather. Okay.
So he's technically Ludwig III.
Right.
Grandfather, brother.
Yeah, but for the purposes of the quiz, we're just calling him Ludwig.
I'll just call him Trio now.
Kind of like Leopold.
Luddy.
Yeah. What was Beethoven really successful at besides composing and playing the piano? Was it romance? Was it public relations? Or was it teaching?
None of the above? None.
Yeah. I mean, not romance. There are books on that. What was number two?
He's
public relations.
No, he's constantly driving people crazy by the things he would say out loud. So, I can't imagine he was a very good teacher.
I mean, like professional public.
Since he could not hear.
Well, that gets a buzzer. I'll just tell you, it's public relations, but in the sense of self-promotion.
Did he invent the 900 number?
No. What he would do is he would get a hold of the editors of papers, of newspapers, and what have you, and different publishers, and say, if you're going to give me a bad review or bad press, you will no longer get any of my music. So he did a little quid pro quo with them and managed to increase his profile that way as a composer. So he was good at self-promotion. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. Okay. Here's a good one. According to research from the University of Michigan, what may have inspired Beethoven's use of syncopation or unusual rhythms in his music?
The hokey pokey.
Was it birdsong? Was it Napoleon's troops in Vienna? Or was it heart disease?
I'm going to go with heart disease.
Yeah, good choice.
They did some analysis on his hair follicles or something like that, right?
Well, they found that the rhythms of certain sections of his pieces of music reflect the irregular rhythms of cardiac arrhythmia. So in other words, some of the syncopations and some of the rhythmic patterns that he used in his music correspond to cardiac arrhythmia, and they think that, there was a connection there, that especially as he got deaf, he could hear his heartbeat all the time and feel it, was much more sensitive to it. So it made its way into the music.
That's amazing.
Yeah. What do you think of that?
It reminds me a little bit, actually, of the very first movement of the 7th Symphony. It's one of the most difficult rhythmic grooves to maintain.
Yeah.
Especially when you're talking about that.
I don't know what button you hit over there, Cresswell.
Yeah, the music was well timed.
Yeah.
I've only got one more question before we take it home. When Beethoven moved to Vienna in his early 20s, he made a name for himself by playing in the Viennese salons. What piece of music did he play? Was it Bach's Well-Tempered Clavier? Was it his own transcription of Irish songs? Or was it piano sonatas by Joseph Haydn?
I'll go with the Irish songs. Wow, that was a bold-faced buzzer.
Yes, try again.
Bach.
Yes, he would play the Well-Tempered Clavier.
Wow.
But for him, it was just the
Ill-tempered.
ill-tempered. Yeah.
The short-tempered clavier. That's PDQ Bach. Wrong Bach. Yeah, I mean, Bach was still alive at the time, right? This would have been in the 1720s. Bach died in 1750. Well, we're just about out of time. Wait.
Let's try that chronology again.
1685 to 1750.
And
Beethoven was born in 1770. Yeah.
I feel like Doctor Who managed to do something very impressive there.
Yeah, that's okay.
Yay!
Anyway, we'll cut that part out. Or maybe not. This is called a behind-the-scenes look at the world of classical music. So behind the scenes, they can hear.
What's a century between friends?
What an idiot I am. Yes, exactly.
We struggle with dates.
Yes.
Metajoule and otherwise.
And you can always trust me when I'm on the air talking about dates, right? Never make a mistake. So we're about out of time. I do want to mention that this concert of Beethoven's music is happening this weekend. And one of the pieces that we didn't talk about, maybe we can talk about this briefly, are the 3 Equali for 4 trombones.
It's a strange title, right?
Yeah.
How can something be equal for 3 when it's made for 4? I struggle with it.
We'll answer that question next time on Toledo Symphony Lab. Now, it's an interesting piece in that, this is one of the pieces of music that was played at Beethoven's funeral.
That's right. That's exactly right.
I mean,
but
he wrote
at
it
his
before
request.
that.
At his request.
He wrote it before then, but
Well,
it was...
Because otherwise he'd be decomposing.
But I'm bummed. Hey.
That's why you got that. Now I just fell into that trap.
Exactly.
No, it's and this will be performed by 4 trombones in the perimeter promenade of the peristyle. So it'll be one of those moments that we have music kind of in a 360-degree perspective.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this is music that's sort of, you talk about the equality or the equals, that kind of has a connection to the Renaissance and polyphony and all of that. As we mentioned, it was played at Beethoven's funeral. It's been played, it kind of, sits in that funerary category of music, which is maybe why we don't hear it that often in the concert hall. But was this, now these were all composed around the same time, as we mentioned before. Can you talk a little bit about this piece, Merwin, and where it fits into the program?
Well, I think that if you talk about the journey that Beethoven undergoes in the Fifth Symphony, for instance, in a way, this concert, I feel like, is attempting to trace that journey for the entire listenership. I think you're starting with music that you almost sense rather than see, because it's not going to be in front of you. It's going to be kind of around you and enveloping you, and then you take the idea of a quartet and manifest it larger in front of you into a string orchestra piece, a piece that's very, very serious, a piece that's, that's very much of this moment. And then you take that into the Seventh Symphony, which really ends in a burst of, I feel like as close to unbridled joy as Beethoven ever gets. And I think
you're getting very meta here, Merwin,
yes,
in how you put this concert together. I think it's great.
Well, I think this is something that was very front of mind for Alain.
Yeah.
Like he was looking to kind of to manifest that journey, not just in terms of the music itself, but also in the way it's experienced. So it's not just like just the notes on the page, but how it feels on the stage, in the hall and on the screens.
Yeah. So it starts small and behind you, then it gets medium-sized in front of you, and then it gets bigger and unbridled. I think that's a great word for it. So, I mean, these aren't accidents. Alain and Merwin are very talented when it comes to thinking about these programs, and I'm very excited for this one. I think you said something though that's appropriate, is that it's serious music, and it is appropriate for the time, and it's really incumbent on us to kind of take that temperature and be a barometer for what we're experiencing right now. And if there is that unbridled joy after all the seriousness, then maybe that's a good prescription.
This program is a production of WGTE Public Media in collaboration with our sponsor, the Toledo Symphony, with generous support from the Rita Barber Kern Foundation. You can download episodes of our program as a podcast by going to our website at wgte.org/lab. You can also subscribe to us through your podcast app of choice, including Apple and Google Podcasts. Don't forget, you can check out all the upcoming events at the Symphony by visiting their website, that is toledosymphony.com, their various social media outlets, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, and the streaming link for concerts that are available on demand is at stream.artstoledo.com. My thanks to Zach Vassar and Merwin Sue. I'm Brad Cresswell. You've been listening to Toledo Symphony Lab from FM 91.